Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar and workshop series conducted by TCS in view of the upcoming management case study examination happening in November 2025. Today's workshop is focused on P2 and the session plan includes the P2 syllabus overview, followed by a discussion of a mock exam task, or as we refer to as masterclasses, and the session will include a Q&A for you to clarify any questions pertaining to today's workshop or in general pertaining to MCS exam prep. So a reminder about the upcoming workshop and the final one on the 9th of November. So Saturday, same time, we would have the E2 workshop, and thereafter, we will have the final workshop on Sunday. So please make sure that you take due note of these dates. And for those who are not in the UK, differences in the timing. All right, let's get started with the P2 syllabus overview. So we will refer to the TCS mock exam syllabus coverage document as we did last week. So we are looking at advanced management accounting. The syllabus comprises of four main syllabus components: capital investment decision-making, managing and controlling performance, managing the costs of creating value, and risk and control. So each of these syllabus components include key topics which we have listed here. So let's start with investment appraisal. Remember, there are four investment appraisal techniques, and most importantly, you could be tested on NPV, IRR, payback period. So you need to have a sound understanding of each of these investment appraisal techniques together with the pros and cons of using these techniques to appraise a capital investment decision. It is also important to remember that NPV is, of course, the most commonly used and popular technique among the four. And we've also seen questions in the exam where the examiner has focused on the challenges of predicting cash flows for an NPV appraisal. So it would be a practical requirement even for those who have sat for the P2 OTQ exam and have got through. You've done the calculations and you have technically been tested on the advantages and drawbacks of NPV. However, you have not encountered a question where you have been tested on what would be the practical challenges in coming up with the numbers for an NPV appraisal. So this is where the case study examination takes your understanding of the concept further, where application is tested. You could also be tested on IRR. So remember, IRR is used in conjunction with NPV, and payback period also is used together to identify the risk associated with a capital investment decision. And together with this, you could also be tested on real options. So remember, there are four, or sometimes you could expand and say there are five real options. And it would also be related to a given scenario. So rather than stating all the real options from P2 in terms of theories, you may be required to analyze the appropriate real option or options to a given scenario. So please make sure that you have a sound understanding of the real options. And within capital investment decision-making syllabus component, you would also see pricing strategies topic being covered. So you should know that there are cost-based and market-based transfer pricing methods. In particular, in the past variants, we've seen market-based pricing strategies being tested more often because cost-based prices could also be tested in relation to different other syllabus areas, in particular with regard to managing the costs of creating value. So before we come to that, let me highlight that with regard to market-based pricing strategies, please make sure you are aware of price skimming, premium, and penetration. So these are often relevant when you're looking at new product developments or new services. And it is important that you are aware of the appropriate situation to use these pricing strategies. So please make sure that you cover those within your revisions. As we move on to the next syllabus component, we find responsibility centers to start with. So this is a topic we've covered in our mock 1 itself. There are 4 types of responsibility centers, and you have to be aware of when these classifications would be relevant within a group or a divisionalized structure, which is what Ressett is also about. In relation to these responsibility centers, you could also be tested on performance measures or KPIs. And in today's discussion, we would be focusing on a mock exam task focused on the balanced scorecard, which is a multi-dimensional performance measurement framework. You could also be tested on benchmarking. And remember, there are 3 different types of benchmarking. And for Ressett, you could look at all these 3 types of benchmarking, especially if you look at competitive benchmarking. In a market which is static and highly competitive, you could be looking at something like benchmarking to see where you might be lagging behind competition. And not surprising, a key component of the P2 syllabus, when you have a divisionalized structure and when the divisions engage in internal trade, it could be in the form of transferring a product or even a service. Transfer pricing implications come in, and it is important that you're thorough with the different types of transfer pricing methods, together with when those methods should be applied, as well as the pros and cons of using a certain method in a given situation. And in the MCS examination, we've also seen questions where the examiner, similar to the challenges of predicting cash flows for an NPV, the examiner has also tested on the challenges of determining an appropriate transfer pricing method to a given scenario. So that becomes a practical task, and obviously it is through mock exam practice that you can prepare yourself for a task like that in the exam. All right, moving on to the third syllabus component, managing the costs of creating value. At a basic level, you could be tested on activity-based management. We haven't seen questions in recent variants, but that does not mean we can rule out this topic. And remember, it could relate to the current business model, or it could be in relation to some developments in the business. So you cannot say that a certain topic would not be tested based on the pre-seen, because there are going to be developments in the exam, and any topic could become relevant in that instance. Cost transformation techniques, a topic which has often been tested. Remember the 6 different measures of the cost transformation techniques, the CIMA cost transformation model. In particular, remember, with specific reference to e-waste in the pre-scenes news article section, there's every possibility that cost transformation techniques could be tested, especially given the fact that it is one of the recommendations that you need to connect product development or products with sustainability. So please make sure that you make specific focus on the cost transformation technique, because the pre-scene gives us sufficient hint that it could be a topic in the examination. Target costing, an outside-in approach to costing. It could be applied for a product. It could also be applied to a service, and you could be tested in the examination with regard to the current business, or if we are looking at growth expansion, then in such a context also you could be tested on target costing. Moving on, customer profitability analysis and product profitability analysis. So for a company which is engaged in providing a physical product, it would be the product profitability analysis. And for an organization which is into services, it would be customer profitability analysis. This is a practically tested topic, and more than theories, you could be presented with a reference material which discusses about the profitability of different services or product lines. For instance, you could be tested on, you could be provided information on how sometimes the sales of consumables give a higher or lower margin in comparison to some of the most expensive items that we would sell, and whether the company should accordingly divest its resources, marketing as well as stock towards the higher margin products. But as you will understand, sometimes we need to have all the products in inventory, because you might remember from the pre-scene, we were clearly told that while customers look for cheaper products, they also make impulse purchases. And therefore, we need to accommodate all these products. But then again, the profitability must be analyzed to make sure that we are devoting the resources towards the most profitable lines of products. You could also be tested on life cycle costing. It is more relevant towards the development of a product. And you might be wondering, how could something like developing a physical product could be relevant? Well, don't be surprised if you were told that Ressett, acquired a manufacturer and now they are working on developing a new product. And how do we go about life cycle costing? You cannot rule out any of these possibilities. And the best example is from the last session, Tremere, where you acquired a manufacturer and you were tested on target costing. So let's be prepared and let's not skip any syllabus areas. You could also be tested on business process re-engineering. This is one of the topics that we covered in, I think I let the cat out of the bag. The most recent mock exams, which many of you are yet to attempt. So I'm giving you a heads up. Please be prepared for BPR. It could be tested in relation to different business functions or processes. And if you look at Ressett's business operations, there are different places in which a BPR approach could prove helpful. You could also be tested with regard to value chain analysis, especially if the company is looking at an acquisition, a vertical integration, an ideal setup for the examiner to bring in the discussion of value chain analysis. TQM, it's all the more important for Ressett because we've been clearly told that we are focused on quality as a reliable supplier of refurbished as well as new and as new graded products. So the costs of quality can be a key discussion for Ressett, because if the inventory department fails to undertake their tasks promptly, then we would be faced with serious quality related issues. And we've also been given hints about data related risks that we are exposed to. So in the event that we fail to wipe out data permanently, we would also be facing legal as well as reputational issues. So an approach like TQM is of paramount importance to a company like Ressett. It's all about making sure you get right first time, and it's all about making sure you look at continuous improvement in a static and highly competitive market. So together with TQM, you could also be tested on Kaizen, maybe not individually, but it's about continuous improvement, which is one of the key principles of TQM. And quality circles could also be linked to TQM because it is one of those recommendations of a TQM approach to quality management that you should encourage as much as possible interdepartmental teams. That should be the ideal way of coming up with quality circles. And there is scope within Ressett to have the buying department staff as well as the inventory department staff to form quality circles so that they can exchange information. And further in the future, when it comes to procurements, the buying department could get it right first time. That is, when they procure, they set out clear guidelines. They establish minimum standards with regard to the type of products, that is species, or whatever items that they are buying, so that the inventory department does not have to report back issues with incoming goods. So ideally, interdepartmental quality circles are great. If not possible, you could at least look at forming intra-departmental quality circles. So those are the topics in relation to managing the costs of creating value. We come to risk and control, a topic which is tested in a very practical aspect. You could start by looking at business risks and mitigation. So there are different types of risks, sometimes the task would simply state business risks, in which case you need to identify which of these risks are relevant from the reference material. Sometimes the examiner is very specific that he wants you to focus on specific types of risks, such as product, operational, or reputational, or even contractual inadequacy risk. Now, in that case, you need to elaborate on the particular types of risks that the examiner has mentioned, and you also need to discuss risk mitigation strategies. Make sure your explanation of risks are practical based on the given scenario, and even more so with regard to the mitigation strategies, because managing risks is all about being practical and not being technical. So please make sure you have a sound understanding of the different types of risks and how they could relate to Ressett. So don't go with pre-prepared answers. Based on the given scenario, read and come up with an appropriate explanation. And always, when you're discussing about risks, don't forget to highlight how it is a problem for the company, how the company is exposed to downside, how could it be a loss or an exposure towards loss for the company. So that is sometimes missing in the answers, especially, answers that fail to score a pass mark. They don't actually explain why it is a problem for the company. So that is where you need to, outline the negative side of the risk and how Ressett may be affected due to those. And together with business risks and mitigation, you could also be tested on sensitivity analysis. This could also be connected with investment appraisal. Yeah, because as you might recall in PV analysis, you could link it with sensitivity analysis, and so is scenario planning. You could also link scenario planning together with an NPV appraisal. And finally, stress testing, a topic which has been tested frequently in the most frequent sittings of the papers. And perhaps it is also down to the fact that the candidates were not strong enough in responding to tasks relating to stress testing. So please make sure that you're thorough, because there are different ways in which things can go wrong. If you look at the news articles, there is more bad news than good news for Ressett. There is an issue with regard to data, and there is an issue with regard to e-waste, and the company is trying to curb, and there are, competition coming from marketplaces. And on top of that, we discuss about call center operations, where we also find that, call center operations have, limited support. That is, we operate from 8 to 8, and we limit the support to 3 months. So more than good news, we have a lot of bad news in the news articles section of the pre-scene. So the exposure to extreme adverse circumstances must be stress tested. And that is why stress testing could become a key topic for the Ressett-based examinations. So that's about it, an outline of the syllabus areas. And let's move on to the next item in the session, that is the discussion of a mock exam task. So let's refer back to mock exam 1, which is what we've been discussing throughout this series of webinars and workshops. You would recall that in the first section, we looked at a diversification scenario, and you were tested on the business risks and mitigation. So Nick discussed this in the answering technique webinar. And as we move on, you have another P2 related task in section 3. This relates to responsibility centers. However, in today's session, I would focus on section 4, in which we are told that we have acquired TFS, and it is a new subsidiary, and we are looking at the performance measurement of the new subsidiary. So let's start with the email. A month has passed. You have received the following email from the senior finance manager. So it relates to performance measurement, P2 related, and financial reporting, which is F2. The board's attention has been drawn towards the shortcoming in the current approach to the performance measurement of the new subsidiary TFS. Discussions have taken place on what framework would best ensure alignment with Ressett's strategic objectives while also capturing the unique aspects of the servicing business. So you would recall we are looking at diversification, and we have acquired a subsidiary which offers PC repairs and services. So you can't manage the performance of this new division the same way you would manage the performance in a retail environment or a resale environment where we are focused on buying and selling. This is about servicing, and each work is unique, and each requires a specific skill set to serve the customers. The CEO has suggested using a balanced scorecard approach to measuring the performance of the new subsidiary, but many board members were not quite familiar with this. On a different matter, please refer to the email I forwarded from the FD, the finance director, and those who have already attempted this mock as per the study plan would remember that this forwarded email relates to the financial reporting related task. So in today's discussion, we can skip this, but remember in the examination, before you read through the subtasks, ideally you should read through the reference material, then you need to make a decision which of these two subtasks are you going to answer first. And you need to look at the timer. Let's say the timer is down to 38 minutes. How would you split the remaining 38 minutes between the two subtasks, or sometimes three subtasks? All right, so let's focus on subtask A, which is the P2 related task. Evaluate the CEO's suggestion that Ressett should introduce a balanced scorecard approach to measure the performance of the new subsidiary. Now, the examiner sometimes makes your life very easy by stating, discuss the advantages and disadvantages, or discuss the benefits and limitations. But sometimes it's about an evaluation. Now, when it is an evaluation, it is not necessary that you speak about the pros and cons, but if you recognize that there are some limitations or disadvantages or drawbacks within the evaluation, you must definitely raise those, because it is only a suggestion that we should use a balanced scorecard approach to measure the performance of the new subsidiary. And I would also like to highlight the fact that when this topic was tested in relation to a trainer, a past case study, the examiner only used the term scorecard. The examiner did not use the full term balanced scorecard and opted to use only the term scorecard within the task requirement. So if you see the term only scorecard, remember the examiner is referring to a balanced scorecard approach. So how have we structured this answer and evaluation? And do not take this as the standard approach to answering any task which states evaluation. Appreciate the context. And in this context, it's about whether we should use balanced scorecard approach or not. So if you look at the answer plan or the answer that we've developed, we've started with a brief explanation. I repeat, a brief explanation of what is a balanced scorecard approach, because it appears that the board members were not quite familiar with what this balanced scorecard approach is. So we begin with a brief explanation of what is balanced scorecard, and thereafter we discuss about how it is helpful for performance evaluation in this context. So we focus on the benefits of using a balanced scorecard approach. And thereafter, we also highlight that there are some challenges or issues of applying a balanced scorecard approach. So we've looked at a balanced evaluation. While highlighting the merits, we've also highlighted that, look here, it's a good approach, but then there are some challenges. And if you can overcome those challenges, then of course, it will serve the intended purpose of managing the performance on a holistic perspective. So that's basically how we've structured. But before we discuss the answer, for the benefit of those who may not have a sound understanding of the balanced scorecard approach to performance measurement, remember it is coming from the works of Kaplan and Norton. originally published in their Harvard Business Review article dating back to 1992, where they highlighted the need to look beyond financial measures. So typically, organizations and shareholders have focused on financial measures. Did we make profits? What was the performance like? And what is the financial position like? And it is based on reported financials. And the reported financials are historical figures, because when you report financial statements, you take the financial year which concluded, and by the time you prepare the accounts, you have them audited and you present it to the shareholders. It would have been 3 to 4 or 5, sometimes 6 months from the balance sheet date. So in an AGM, you're looking back, what, 15, 16 months, and you are assessing the company's performance, and you don't know what is going on at the moment. So Kaplan and Norton highlighted this issue in their news article, and it was one of the most popular news articles and most requested prints of the Harvard Business Review, and that led to their publication in 1996, where they elaborated the idea of a balanced scorecard approach. So the beauty of the balanced scorecard approach is that while they raise concerns, while they critique the focus on financial indicators or financial KPIs, they said that, look here, whatever said and done, we do need the financial measures, but we also need to appreciate the fact that these financial measures are impacted by certain other measures or certain other perspectives, and we need to bring in an integrated approach towards measuring performance. Kaplan and Norton suggested that there are mainly 4 perspectives, but remember, they said it's not always 4. An organization can have a 5th one, such as an environmental perspective or a sustainability perspective in today's day and age, where sustainability is becoming a serious focal point, especially with reporting requirements such as ESG. So what they foresaw in 1996 might become extremely important 30 years later today, but we are yet to see any developments on that. But the idea is that Kaplan and Norton did not say it must be limited to 4, but they stressed that it must be at least 4. And the 4 key performance areas are financial perspective, the typical profit-related, liquidity-related, as well as gearing or financial position-related metrics, together with how satisfied have the customers been while we achieved profits last year. How happy were our customers? Would they contribute towards similar profits or higher profits in the future? Or for the sake of profits, did we just ignore the customer and exploit them? So it's important that you also take into account customer satisfaction related KPIs, performance measures. And you also need to remember that if the customers are to be satisfied and happy, it will come down to our internal processes and our operations. So to satisfy our customers mainly, what business processes must we excel at? What is triggering customer dissatisfaction? Which parts of our operations should we look at? And let's develop some KPIs to make sure that our internal processes or operations are aligned with meeting and exceeding customers' expectations. And for us to excel in doing that, well, we need to learn and we need to innovate. So we also bring in the innovation perspective, and it is also connected with the growth of the company. So we bring in learning and growth, and this includes both the employee perspective as well as the innovation perspective. I repeat, learning and growth perspective includes a focus on human resources or human capital, as well as innovation capabilities of the business. And Kaplan and Norton say, when you look at these perspectives and when you develop KPIs which are measurable to identify the achievement of the objectives that you would set for these perspectives, these should be linked to the broader vision of the organization and the strategy to achieve the objectives, mission, and the vision. So what this does is goal congruence. The employees are focused on KPIs, the achievement of which will enable you to achieve the strategy. And if the strategy is achieved, then you will achieve the objectives, mission, and by extension, the vision that you set for the organization. So what you might be doing on a day-to-day basis operationally would be linked to a KPI, which is an internal business process KPI, and that KPI will relate to the strategy. And the more KPIs that you achieve across these perspectives, the more realization of the strategy you will have, and the more realization of the strategy that you have, the achievement of objectives, mission, and vision would be achieved. So that's how the balanced scorecard approach was foreseen by Kaplan and Norton, and that is how it became a popular approach to managing the performances, especially if it is a division with a lot of autonomy. Right, now, how can we connect this to the present context, the scenario that we are faced with a new subsidiary, and it is not our line of business? And what would be the benefits of using a balanced scorecard approach? Well, I would believe that I've already highlighted a number of advantages, but let's look at the answer structure. You can start by explaining what exactly is a balanced scorecard. So it's a framework, it's a performance measurement framework, which is focused on multi-dimensional performance measures. And specifically, these are financial, customer, internal business, and learning and growth. And together, these four perspectives or more would provide a holistic view of the performance of the organization, not just financially, but how have you performed well in terms of your employees, in terms of your customers, your employees, your innovation capabilities, as well as your operations. And what would be the benefits of using this approach to manage the subsidiaries' performance? Well, it integrates both financial and non-financial measures. So while we would have focused on improving our top line and bottom line, a balanced scorecard approach would collectively drive the subsidiaries' attention towards strategic issues in the business. And when we say strategic issues, the long-term issues that would impact the sustainability of the organization. And that would mean it will draw our attention towards non-financial factors. And you could cite multiple examples. And for customer related, you could look at service turnaround times. So we are trying to improve customer satisfaction. And when the customer, is seeking our service for a routine service, how long do we take to complete the service, and how long does it take for the customer to receive it after it is done, depending on the mode of service. And in the process of undertaking repairs, what is our error rates? Operationally, have we performed the services and the repairs, in a comprehensive and accurate manner that the customer does not complain back to us? So how effective and efficient are the operations? And moreover, we could also look at learning and growth in terms of staff retention. If staff are happy with us, they would not leave. So you could look at churn rate or the employee turnover ratios. And with regard to innovation, you could also look at the adoption of latest diagnostic technologies. What are the latest softwares that we are using to troubleshoot issues, and what new equipment or softwares that we've incorporated within our services? So by focusing not only on financial factors, but beyond, you will have a comprehensive view of the performance and continuous improvement of the subsidiary. So Ressett's head office would receive reports which would not only highlight the financial performance and position of the subsidiary, but would also give you KPIs relating to all these other perspectives. So sometimes these other areas would justify the financials. For instance, if the customer satisfaction has been declining, well, then you know that the financial perspective would have been negatively impacted. And if you see that operationally your KPIs have not been met, if there is an underperformance in terms of operational KPIs, well, that would explain why your financials have declined in the last year. And while the financials are good, if you have not achieved your innovation related KPIs, it is an indication that you may not be able to sustain these KPIs in the future. And that's what happened to companies which did exceptionally well financially, but their innovation related KPIs were not achieved, and that impacted their very existence later on. So remember, the Ressett board, the head office, will receive a comprehensive report and they would be in a better position to gauge the performance of the new subsidiary. So we could definitely highlight it as a benefit of using this approach. Moreover, as I already pointed out, a balanced scorecard approach fosters goal congruence because you will align Ressett's strategic objectives along with TFS's operations. Because remember, in the mock exam, one of the issues that was highlighted is why we acquired this new subsidiary. We want to recommend this PC repairs and servicing arm to our customers. So after the warranty period expires, if they have needs with regard to servicing, well, they can always come back to us. We have a separate division for that. So we have strategic objectives behind this acquisition. And if you develop KPIs, which would link Ressett's strategic objectives of the acquisition along with the operations, then it will foster goal congruence. So the starting point would be to set up KPIs that reflect strategic objectives of the acquisition. And once you've set the KPIs, you set targets for managers and employees based on those KPIs. And that would mean it will align the actions, decisions, and behavior of managers and employees with the group objectives. So that's another reason why we can agree with CEO's suggestion to introduce a balanced scorecard approach, goal congruence, because we don't want this new subsidiary to operate in isolation, but we want them to work along with us so that the group benefits. Another key point that you could have highlighted is with regard to long-term perspective in decision making, because if you judged this division based only on ROI, return on investment, they would have only focused on improving profitability, and they would have focused on improving profitability as a percentage of the investment. That leads to short-termist decision making. And when you focus not only on the financials, but on the broader aspects of performance, it eliminates the focus on short-termism and it encourages a focus on long-term decision making. Because employee perspective, let's say you focus on employee training because you have a KPI that a certain number of training hours must be achieved. If the focus was only on financial KPIs, return on investment, the subsidiaries board may have declined investment in training and development because that would be an expense and it would hurt the profits of the division and your ROI would drop. But now, despite your ROI dropping, because you have a KPI relating to average training hours per employees, you would spend, and definitely, while not a short-term benefit, in the long run, loyal employees, competent employees will contribute towards better service. It will contribute towards better customer satisfaction, and that will contribute towards a higher bottom line. So it will encourage long-term decision-making, or it will eliminate a narrow-minded focus on the short term. So the divisional managers are urged to consider impact of decisions beyond short term, and that is another positive aspect with regard to employing a balanced scorecard approach. However, there are certain challenges that we need to overcome. And the main challenge would be to gain the commitment from the senior management of the responsibility center. That is, the subsidiaries management should be willing to support and should be willing to show performance across all these metrics that we set for them. The easier one is to focus on one metric, right? And if I'm to cite the very example that Kaplan and Norton use in their article, they draw a conversation between a pilot and a passenger, and the multiple controls that the pilot has and the multiple indicators that the pilot uses. So from the altimeter to the speed meter to whatnot, and running a company is also like that. You actually picture the cockpit and you see the number of indicators, and Kaplan and Norton argue that is the number of indicators that a business should have if you are to make sure that you reach your mission and vision. So the managers are not going to like it, obviously, because if they were not subject to a balanced scorecard approach, and if you all of a sudden introduce a multi-dimensional performance measure, and where you all of a sudden say, look here, we are also focused on innovation, we are focused on employee, training hours, their retention, you impose this on the management, and if you don't get their support, it is not going to be successful, because it will require their time and effort, and employees may not welcome the change. And there can be resistance to change from lower level staff too, because previously they may not have been held responsible for something such as maybe a turnaround time. And now you are also asking them to make sure that you achieve a certain target with regard to delivery of work to the customer, and they might perceive a loss of autonomy, and they might become a little discomfort. They might develop some discomfort with focus on non-financial metrics, because no one likes to be subject to a number of KPIs. And definitely, if the staff resist or do not cooperate, then of course this performance measurement framework would not yield the results that you expect it to yield. So that is with regard to staff and the behavior implications. But we also have some problems with regard to KPIs. So this is particularly true with regard to a complex business model, where you need to set the right KPIs, the key performance indicators. And remember, KPIs should be smart. They must be specific and measurable. They must be realistic. And, people should accept those KPIs, right? So it is important to identify appropriate KPIs across these multi-dimensions. And most importantly, the KPIs that you set need to be relevant for the PC repair and servicing context. It is challenging because it is service, and each work is unique when it comes to repairs, even servicing. The customer may bring the PC for a service. You might have a target. If it is a service of a laptop, it must be carried out within a certain number of days or hours. But then as start the process, as you look at the hardware, you contact the customer and say, look here, your battery needs replacement, or, you might want to change these, components, because if you want to improve the life of this laptop, you may need to invest a little more. So although the customer came for the service, the technician identified issues beyond the service, and now it might take a little longer to resolve this, because the customer might also take a bit of time to decide whether it would be worth it. So you can't judge the operations based on a set of KPIs, and you need to have some flexibility. And time to time, you need to review and reflect these KPIs based on developments in technology and even customer expectations. For instance, operational KPIs. You acquire a new technology, and that technology can improve diagnostics, and you might expect a faster service from the operational team. And sometimes customer expectations also change with the current, generation being very demanding. They want quick solutions, and sometimes they don't want unsolicited advice. So if they handed you a laptop for servicing, just get the servicing done. Don't come up with other suggestions as to whether it would be worth upgrading or whatnot. So based on customer expectations and changes in technology and sometimes market conditions, you need to review and update the KPIs, because they must be relevant to the current context. And not only will they welcome the approach of a balanced scorecard approach, but they will also not be very comfortable when you keep changing the KPIs time to time, because they settle down for a system, and then you all of a sudden you break the system saying, look here, I think we need to revise the KPIs, and here onwards you would be subject to a new set of KPIs, and that's not going to work. And also, it is important to remember that some uncontrollable factors can influence KPIs. For instance, you could all of a sudden have a loss of key employees in the technical team, and maybe they joined a competitor, or maybe they've left and set up their own company. So some uncontrollable factors can influence the KPIs, and you need to understand that not only internal factors, but external factors beyond the control of managers and staff influence the KPIs. And therefore, we need to exercise caution when judging the employees based on KPIs. As you would agree, even customer satisfaction related ratings, some customers have the tendency of never giving a 5-star rating, or some have the tendency of always giving something like an average rating 3 or 2.5. So, a technician was receiving 5.55, and all of a sudden, a customer rates as 2.5. It would not enable that technician to achieve a 5 out of 5. But you need to understand the fact that sometimes it's not the employee's fault, but it was beyond his control. So that was just one specific example, and there could be a number of issues that affect the achievement of KPIs, and we need to, appreciate the fact that we cannot always judge the employees or the managers based on the achievement of a certain set of KPIs. And moreover, KPIs would mean data. Remember, I highlighted that KPIs must be smart. So you're looking at specific, measurable, achievable data, and you should have systems that facilitate timely and accurate data recording and reporting with regard to various aspects needed to monitor KPIs. It's not going to be easy to identify what would be internal process related KPIs for a business which is into repairing and servicing PCs. It would not be easy for you to come up with KPIs with regard to innovation. To what extent can you be innovative within the repair and servicing sector? And how is it that you're going to measure customer satisfaction? Well, of course, we can ask them to rate, but beyond the ratings, what other ways can we actually measure their satisfaction? So it's not easy sometimes, and you will need to collect data, and you will need to report the data. And unless you have the infrastructure to collect, monitor, and analyze the data, you will not be able to measure the achievement of the KPIs. So it's also important for you to check whether the subsidiary TFS has the necessary data, reporting as well as collection systems for you to be able to set these KPIs and monitor the achievement of the KPIs. So those are the key points that we've covered, and you could have also discussed other appropriate points, and provided it is relevant to the context, you would have equally scored the marks. But these are some of the key points that you could have discussed. So that's about the answer discussion. And before I open up the session for the Q&A, a reminder about the success rate that we achieved. And if you would like to obtain our services, you could always check out the 2 courses we have in Essential and Premium in our website. All right, as we move on to the Q&A session, let me pause the recording and open up the session for you. All right. I hope you benefited from the Q&A discussion. And remember, you can always reach out to us through our network. And please follow us on our social media pages, especially the YouTube and TikTok forums, where you will find mini clips which summarize the webinar and workshop series content. So until the next week's workshop, thank you for joining in and have a great weekend. Good night.